Welcome in, everybody, and welcome to the Marshall Experience. Tonight we are talking about the NFC South as a entirety of the division in regards to fantasy. Right, we've done this the last few weeks with divisions, and we're continuing the process. But before we get into things, of course, we want to thank who we're powered by, the Sports Lounge Media. Big things happening over there. If you haven't yet, please go check them out on YouTube. Subscribing is free, as well as the Marshall Experience. We could really use the YouTube subscribers. So if you're listening, please hop over there. And again, it's completely free. So, and our sponsors, the Mogul brand and the Diamond Collection. We also want to thank them and for everything that they do. Sorry for the late start tonight. So we're going to get jumped right into things. Again, the NFC South as a complete fantasy whole. And what questions we have about the NFC South. Okay, so again, we'll start off with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs ripped off their fourth consecutive NFC South championship last season on the back of one of the league's, most efficient overall offenses. They were fourth in points per game at 29.5, fifth in EPA per drop back, and sixth in EPA per rush. Their defense is kind of what got them in trouble at times in the season, and they were 16th in points per game against at 22. So sometimes their defense just didn't live up to the expectation. Unfortunately, the good times stopped rolling in the wild card round at the hands of Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. In my opinion, some ill-timed fourth quarter botch snaps. Exchanges were ultimately too much for the Baker Mayfield and company to overcome. The good news is, however, out of this is the Bucs somehow managed to return all 11 starters on the offense. They even added first-round wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, and the defense perhaps got enough reinforcements through free agency and the draft to improve upon last year's, just average performance. Replacing the OC Liam Cohen, who went to Jacksonville, isn't ideal. But Vegas still fully expects this group to be one of the highest scoring units in football, as do I. So this brings us to our first question. Is Baker Mayfield still a value in 2025 drafts? Okay, on one hand, Mayfield's reinvention in Tampa Bay has been nothing short of spectacular. Let's be honest about it. First in passing touchdowns at 69 the past 2 years, and fresh off the most efficient season of his career, based on nearly any advanced metric you want to look at. Okay, it's clear that the rest of the NFL messed up by letting the former number one overall pick, as we remember, make his way to the Buccaneers on a measly 1 year, $4 million contract back in 2023. He's not making measly $4 million anymore. And on the other hand of that, parts of Mayfield's game from last season in particular do scream regression. Okay, from a league-high 16 interceptions to an easy career-high mark in rushing yards per game, which was 22. Mayfield's quarterback 4 finish in 2024 was great. It was great and all, but it's worth wondering if chasing that level of fantasy excellence is, a wise decision. It's certainly possible that Mayfield's scrambling goodness keep on getting on. Although historically quarterbacks do indeed run less as they get older, obviously. Meaning another big-time fantasy campaign from the now 30-year-old will likely need to be fueled mostly through the air. Okay, so what is Baker Mayfield's 2025 outlook? Similar to Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, Mayfield is as good as a bet as to any to finish near the top of the league's passing leaderboards. In Fantasyland, I'm not necessarily inclined to go out of my way to draft them early when similar, again, pocket types like Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, and Tua, among others, are 3+ rounds later, guys. I mean, you're getting the same. Not necessarily the same value, because I think Baker is up there, but you're getting the same type of quarterback that's not mobile, and is just reliant on the passing game, right? You guys are getting those guys 3 rounds later. Typically, I've only prioritized Mayfield in drafts when I've managed to land Mike Evans, right? Our next question is Bucky Irvin poised to seize a 3-down role this year? Bucky was one of the most fun players to watch with the football in his hands last season. The man really is electric. And yet it took a back-breaking fourth-quarter fumble from Rashad Wright to in Week 16 for the Buccaneers to finally give the starting job over to Bucky Irvin. Now Irving has received plenty of touches and putting up big numbers as the team overqualified running back 2. But this was just this was still just the running back 29 in terms of scoring last year, which attempts to provide a singular number to sum up a player's workload. Okay, it'd make a lot of sense if the awesome 1-year running back, and the late season surge leads to a more featured role in 2025. Okay, although the overall history of day 3 or undrafted free agent running backs who boomed as rookies, it's quite troubling. These are rookie running backs drafted in rounds 4 through 7 or undrafted with top 24 fantasy numbers since 2015. Okay, let's see if you guys can remember some of these names. Since Bucky Irvin was running back 19 last year, we had prior to that running back 20 in 22 was Dameon Pierce. You have Elijah Mitchell in 21. James Robinson for the Jags, I believe, was running back 5 in 2020. Philip Lindsay for the Denver Broncos. We know how that story kind of turned out. As long as Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard went from the Bears to the Eagles and then kind of just fell out of the league. And then I had to actually look up this name, guys. Carlos Williams was running back 22 in 2015. With that being said, I do have Irving set to rack up the position's 9th most carries at 225 and the 10th most targets at 53. I plan on him being involved in this offense. Honestly, that's a scary combination considering the second-year talent to possibly manage to replicate his top 5 efficiency numbers, virtually in everything from a season ago. Excuse me. As for the rest of the crew and the running back committee, White followed up his running back 10 finish in 2023 with a running back 23 numbers last season. So, of course, he did outscore Irving through the first 16 weeks of last season, only being reduced to a true backup during the team's final 3 games of the year. Okay, plenty of those numbers were all the well-schemed, wide-open variety. But just realize any sort of drop-off in the receiving department, which I think does happen with Bucky Irvin, would be rough considering, no top 24 running back was more reliant on the pass game production last season than Rashad White. Okay? Then we'll get into Sean Tucker. He only had 59 total touches last season, but he certainly made the most of them. Let's be honest about it. We're talking about the most explosive running back in the NFL when it came to percentage of carries to gain 10-plus yards last season, which was 14%. Now, that may not seem like a big number to fantasy managers, but 14% of the time, this guy's taking it off for more than 10 yards a carry. I take those numbers as a coach. Tucker also easily ranked first in yards per route run. Okay, so what that means is when he's running the route out of the backfield, these are the yards that he is averaging per catch. Okay, among 82 qualified backs. Again, he ranked first in that, guys. That matters. It doesn't matter if he catches it or he doesn't catch it. That is a route run, and these are the average amount of yards that they average. Okay, I think he possibly could challenge for that running back too. Maybe an injury happens, something comes up. kind of like the Bucky Irvin situation. Maybe Sean Tucker has to make Tampa Bay realize what they really have. So what is our fantasy outlook for Bucky Irvin in 2025? I haven't necessarily gone out of my way to select Irving in the round 2 of early fantasy drafts, but his overall ADP is reasonable. Okay. There's a decent teardrop at wide receiver after the first 11 are off the board. Significant drop off. The top 2 tight ends also go before Irving in plenty of drafts. Okay, this leaves him up against like Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, 2 running backs who should have plenty of fantasy-friendly touches inside offenses with top 10 scoring potential. I think Bucky Irvin we can throw into that conversation, guys. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the ability and have proven to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. Otherwise, Rachaad White is an interesting flex with benefits option. Honestly, priced next to more handcuff, clear-cut options like Ray Davis or Isaac Guerendo. While Tucker is, a last-round dart in deeper leagues. In redraft leagues, I would not draft a Sean Tucker. Okay. Now, are the Olds still the best fantasy pass game targets in Tampa Bay? Okay. Evans 11th. It gives me goosebumps every time I say that about Mike Evans. I'm a big Mike Evans affidavit. Evans' 11th consecutive 1,000-yard campaign featured him overcoming a midseason hamstring injury to supply, one of the better feel-good moments of the year. Okay, let's be honest about it. Perhaps most impressive about the latest greatness from number 13 was his ability to age like fine wine. Okay, his open score, okay, which is meant to help quantify separation, okay, has only gone up during the last 3 seasons. Okay, he's tied Malik Neighbors and A.J. Brown for top separator honors in 2024. That's hell of a good company, guys. Okay, we aren't quite looking at an early career, Jameis Winston-induced production, but Evans has actually found more success with Mayfield at quarterback than he did with Tom Brady. Okay? Then there's Chris Godwin. He reportedly left roughly about $20 million on the table to stay in Tampa Bay. I think that he thinks this is a good situation for him to be in. I think that, of course, that 2025 will have new challenges. He does turn 29 in February. His timetable for recovery from last season's dislocated ankle is unclear. Excuse me. But Todd Bowles' assertion that he had a chance to be back for a late playoff run, in my opinion, was intriguing. But has since been followed up, by quite a bit more skepticism. Okay, Dr. Chuona is who his doctor was for his ankle. He does believe, okay, that he likely will be playing in week 1 of 2025. He has come out and said that Chris Godwin is above schedule, so looking good for Chris Godwin. Okay, if healthy for week 1, Godwin will be an absolute smash value, guys, at his present mid-tier wide receiver 3 price tag. After all, Ja'Marr Chase was the only wide receiver with more fantasy points per game than Godwin in weeks 1 through 7 last season. Godwin was a wide receiver too, guys. Okay, his per route efficiency was also up there with the position's very best. I think Chris Godwin is an underrated wide receiver, especially when it comes to fantasy, okay? If Godwin is not quite ready to operate at his peak, look for the Bucs to lean more heavily on their pair of young wide receivers, okay? One of those guys being Jalen McMillan. give the man credit for scoring 8 touchdowns as a rookie. Pretty impressive. But many of his big plays, similar to Rachaad White, were of the well-schemed blown coverage variety. Okay? Expecting an increased target share after the Bucs decided to spend a first-rounder on the position feels like wishful thinking. Okay? They also brought back, obviously, Chris Godwin. So, again, to imagine Jalen McMillan catching 8 touchdowns again this year, it's not logical. Okay, next guy we'll get into is the Mecca Mbuka. The Ohio State University all-time leader in career receptions. Mbuka was seemingly unanimously praised by insiders and analysts alike throughout the draft process. He was very high after and really sought after, but of course, bundles of targets might not initially be on the table as well. Maybe the third option, but possibly even the fourth option behind Evans, Godwin, and possibly even McMillan. Just don't overly sleep on the wide receiver 3. I think that he's definitely draftable as a rookie. He's one of the more draftable ones. But again, guys, our expectations have to come down. Okay. So what is an outlook for the 2 starters, right? Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Evans, wide receiver 20 ADP, feels like another bet that Father Time is coming, for the soon 32-year-old. Okay. I think this is more of a Derrick Henry situation for me. I am a big Mike Evans fan. The guy has only produced. Again, we go back to the Cuddy system. That first letter, consistency. Okay, consistency and durability. 2 of the big things in the Cuddy system this man has been proven to do year in and year out. Again, 11 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. It speaks for itself. Okay. While the history of 30-plus-year-old wide receivers balling and Fantasyland isn't great, again, it's also not exactly non-existent. Okay, ultimately, I'm fine mixing in, Mike Evans in the same tier as like Terry McLaurin and DJ Moore. But the target competition and age are concerning enough to not exactly make Evans someone I'm consistently going out of my way to draft. Again, as I said earlier, if we absolutely land a Mike Evans in a second or third or fourth round, I might be screaming Baker Mayfield later in the drafts. Okay. On the other hand, Chris Godwin, who is a wide receiver 35 ADP, that is extremely high, guys. I feel like he is a great candidate to be ranked much higher in week 1 when healthy compared to where he's been drafted at the moment. Okay. He's a particularly great mid-round addition for teams that spend the early rounds dabbling in quarterback, running back, and tight end streets. Okay, if you wait on wide receiver, Chris Godwin might be your guy. Okay, now Mbuka and McMillan are viable late-round darts at the position. Again, I would probably, in my opinion, take the experience over Mbuka with McMillan, but I'm pretty sure I'm avoiding both guys. That target room, especially with throwing Cade Otton in there and a running back room that also catches the football, it doesn't really scream success to me when it comes to fantasy land. Okay. I've around the Evans and Godwin. I'm really preferring legit running backs. Like Isaiah Pacheco, Brian Robinson, maybe potential high-end quarterbacks like Justin Fields or Kyler Murray. But, again, these guys make more sense than a wide receiver 4 on the Bucs. Okay, so Evans and Godwin are the only guys that I'm really paying attention to in the Tampa Bay wide receiver room. Okay, now we go to the tight ends. Is Cade Otton the late-round tight end to prioritize in 2025? Okay, Otton has essentially handled an every down role ever since being drafted in the 4th round of the 2022 draft. The fantasy results have been good. not great. His points per game per year since entering the league, he was tight end 28, tight end 24, and really took off last year at tight end 12, averaging 10 points per game. That said, simultaneous injuries to Evan and Godwin last season did demonstrate, a newfound ceiling for the tight end, as Cade Otton then worked during their injuries as the number one tight end. He was averaging a whopping 19 points per game during the weeks 7 through 10 last season. Okay, so the bottom line is here for Cade Otton, the two cheapest tight ends from offense is implied to score at least 24 points per game next season. Mike Gesicki at 23 and Otton at 24. Okay. While neither should exactly be prioritized as your go-to number one option at the position, due to their respective high-end target competition, we keep talking about that. But each makes for a rather terrific second or third ad at the position for tight ends. Now, are their outlooks that different from far more expensive options, Dallas Goedert and Brenton Strange? They're dealing with some similar situations, especially Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia. But, you go to Brenton Strange in Jacksonville, he's now got Travis Hunter. He's got Brian Thomas Jr., right? He doesn't have as much competition as Goddard, Otton, or Gesicki might have. But again, the competition is still there. So, as has the Tampa Bay defense been a pass funnel group under Todd Bowles. Okay? Bowles has been in charge of the Bucs defense since 2019. Perhaps not so coincidentally, the run-stuffing monster Vita Vea has been by the head coach's side the entire way, leading to this group and regularly ranking toward the top of the league in run defense. Vea is a big part of that, but not so much against the pass in recent years. Okay. The last few years, they've been 19th and 22nd in EPA per drop back, while being 7th and 5th in EPA per rush. So again, their defense is pass game is not so well, but they usually are pretty strong in the run defense. Okay, Tampa Bay did use multiple draft picks, top 100 picks at that, on defensive backs this year. Just realize that there remains plenty of potential for aerial shootouts between Mayfield and, whoever is opposite on the sideline. Okay, so what is our prediction for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2025? The Bucs are, again, in my opinion, the favorite inside the putrid NFC South, okay, which isn't exactly guaranteed to be overly improved. Bryce Young and Michael Penix could change that sentiment with the better play. We'll get into them a little bit later, but that's far from a given, right? Ultimately, the 9.5 win total for me is one of the tougher ones I've seen during this team preview series. But give me the over. I wouldn't recommend putting the mortgage on this one, in my opinion. But my bold fantasy call is that Mike Evans tells Father Time to kick the road one more season and turns in yet another 1K season and double-digit campaign. Book it here at the Marshall Experience. Next team we're going to get into is the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, the Falcons won 6 of their first 9 games last season. Look to be well on their way to their first NFC South title since 2016. Okay, they have young studs like Bijan Robinson, Jake London was grooving. The $150 man and Kirk Cousins was swag surfing. I mean, even Kyle Pitts was showing signs of life, right? Well, and then, no pun intended, but things went south quickly. 4 consecutive losses and a rather pitiful 15-9 victory over the low-end Raiders at that time, led to Cousins hitting the bench in favor of the 8th overall pick in Michael Penix. Back-to-back fun shootout losses against the Commanders and the Panthers closed out what wound up being an awfully, mediocre season. Okay, the Atlanta Falcons in 2024 were 13th in points per game and 23rd against points against. Okay, so again, that defense has to be stronger. And again, we hope that Michael Penix in his second year can really come to fruition. Okay, of course, new year, new Falcons. Organization is hopeful that Penix has the ability to take this offense from good to great, and that a plethora of new edge defenders helps that defense finish better than 18th in scoring for the first time since 2017. Okay, they've had a historical bad pass defense since 2017. Okay, so what sort of upside did Michael Penix flash as a rookie? Okay, well, small sample size be damned. The mixtape of his best throws is certainly fun to watch. However, the advanced metrics aren't all great. Yes, Penix managed to put forward pretty great marks at EPA per dropback. He was ranked 10th in that. And the PFF pass grade, which he was ranked 4th. But the completion percentage over expected, he was ranked 42nd at a negative 4%. And overall passer rating, he was ranked 41st. Okay, they were far, far from great. But nobody had a higher big time throw rate than Penix. Okay, which was especially cool to see considering the rookie was up there with Lamar Jackson and Bo Nix as the league's best quarterbacks at avoiding sacks and limiting turnover-worthy plays. Even the interceptions Penix did throw, in my opinion, weren't all on him. So now, all of what he did last season did only result in a quarterback 31, quarterback 23, and then a quarterback 6 finish in week 18. Okay, now I think this is a big side of the lack of rushing floor. He had 11 total rushing yards the whole season. Now, that is, again, only a 3-game sample, but 11 yards is pretty rough, guys. He's firmly in the Tua conversation and the Matthew Stafford tier of pocket passer quarterbacks who need to be lethal through the air to keep up with the position's dual threat talents. Okay, so what is our fantasy outlook for Michael Penix in 2025? Penix's subpar completion rate has been a hot topic, but I think his sky-high average target depth is a major reason why. He's not exactly in bad company when looking at the accuracy by distance, okay? But still, his type of quarterback of being a pure passer, zero rusher, doesn't present a ton of upside in the year 2025 outside of leagues that reward more than 4 points per passing touchdowns. Now, guys, that is your standard leagues. Your standard leagues do 4 points, but some leagues, like our own at Sports Lounge Media, we do the fun 6 points per touchdown. Now, maybe Penix does his best Jared Goff impression and competes for the league's lead in passing yards and touchdowns, right? But that's asking for a lot for a man with just 105 professional pass attempts to his name. Okay, Penix is in the same tier as guys like C.J. Stroud, Tua, and Stafford. Fine enough low-end quarterback 2s with, potential in the right matchup. But not guys who you should be looking at to lead your, 10-team your 10-person team league, right? You don't want Michael Penix being your guy of your squad 16, 17 weeks of the season, in my opinion. Okay, with that said, this tier of quarterbacks does project similarly to more expensive status-esque passers like Jared Goff, and Dak Prescott, making them, my preferred second quarterback options in a super flex land. Now, does Bijan Robinson have a case in that fact as the running back one? Robinson turned a whopping 365 touches into 1,887 yards, total yards at that, and 15 scores last season, as well the engine of the Falcons' 13th ranked scoring offense. Now, life with Michael Penix under center isn't guaranteed to lead to weekly fireworks. Just realize the volume alone is enough to earn Bijan this ranking. Consider just 4 running backs are projected to see 300 plus combined carries and targets next season. Okay, that would be Saquon, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, and Ashton Jeanty. Throw in a sneaky, great pass game floor that has resulted in Bijan catching a whopping 119 passes over the last 2 seasons. That is third among running backs. And you have the consensus running back 2, in all of fantasy rankings, and it wouldn't surprise anyone if that winds up being too low. Let's be honest about it. Then there's Tyler Algier, who deserves credit, right, for largely making the most out of his opportunities during his short time in the league. At the risk of jinxing the man, knock on wood, Algier has had 586 combined carries and targets in his 3-year career with zero fumbles or drops, guys. Tyler Algier in a 3-year career and 586 combined carries and targets, 0 drops or fumbles. I thought that was pretty impressive. For somebody that's putting that stat line up, if I'm the coach, that guy's going to see the field. What is our outlook for Bijan Robinson in 2025? Bijan is worthy of being the number 1 overall selection. Okay, in my opinion, in half PPR formats. In the full PPR formats, it should be Jamar Chase when you get that full point per catch. Okay, but if you would simply prefer to not take chances on Saquon Barkley because of his age or a big, workload last year, meanwhile, Algier is an elite A-tier handcuff option who is far more worthy of a late round dart throw than, your wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6 types. Who will never feel that good about putting into your lineup anyway. Okay. Algier is, when he is on the field, he produces. Okay. We can't reiterate that enough. Now, could the Falcons have 2 potential top 24 wide receivers? There was a lot to like about London's 2024 campaign. Career high counting numbers across the board were complemented by elite marks in yards per route run. He was 11th. And targets per route run, he was 5th. Okay, it turns out trying to cover, the 6'4" wide receiver at 213, comes with a massive wingspan and quick feet, isn't really the easiest job in the world. You throw in the reality that Penix fed the former 8th overall pick a whopping 39 targets during the last 3 games of the 2024. Nobody else had more than 12, guys. Drake London is Michael Penix's guy, and I think that should continue this year. I think it's clear that, London is deserving of a top 12 recognition at the position ahead of 2025. Of course, things weren't always picture perfect for London. Now, don't get it twisted. He was great throughout 2024, but did you know that Darnell Mooney actually had more receiving yards during the first 14 weeks of last season? Okay. Now, Mooney didn't exactly put his best foot forward during his brief stint with Penix. He missed week 18 with a shoulder injury. That didn't help. So he only played 2 games. Very, very small sample size. But that didn't change the fact that he looked pretty damn locked in as the passing game's number 2 target. One of just 5 wide receivers to average north of 15 yards per reception and 9 yards per target last season. Okay, the ex-Bear veteran proved to be rather lethal on the outside throughout his first year in Atlanta. This brings us to, the primary question. How often does one offense enable multiple top 24 wide receivers? Answer, more than you think. Okay, specifically an average of 5 teams per season have enabled multiple top 24 wide receivers and points per game over the last decade of action. 2018 Rams, Cup, and I don't think that was Nakua's rookie year. I can't remember who was on the Rams with Cup, but I know Cup was there. And the 2020 Buccaneers, which had Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Okay. Finally, shout out goes out to Ray McCloud, who locked down the starting slot job and wound up finishing as the overall wide receiver 50 in points, PPR points, 1 spot behind Rome Odunze. Okay, that's not exactly a ton of upside here, and it's possible someone like Jamal Agnew or Cardale Hodge squeezes into the rotation, right? Remember Hodge on that game-winning catch in the playoffs. But for now, the great-grandson of Fox does indeed profile as the offense's number 3 wide receiver, something that is fairly rare to find at his ADP, which is a wide receiver 90. Okay, you're not going to find that that target share at that deep into the draft, guys. So what is our outlook for the fantasy room of the wide receivers for Atlanta? London is a consensus number top 10 wide receiver thanks to his combination of proven upside and sky-high target ceiling. The London and Ladd McConkey, A.J. Brown tier is right about where I draw the line in round 2 before taking a more serious look at running backs like Jonathan Taylor or Josh Jacobs. Meanwhile, Mooney carries an affordable wide receiver 47, fresh off a wide receiver 35 finish in PPR points per game. I haven't gone out of my way to prioritize him ahead of similarly priced talents like Stephon Diggs or Josh Downs, but I do believe that the clear-cut number 2 option in Atlanta deserves the benefit of the doubt ahead of rookies like Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, and Jaden Higgins. Okay, what are we seriously about to do? This is one of my biggest pet peeves in fantasy. Okay, are we seriously about to do the Kyle Pitts thing again? Okay, if there's anything that's been consistent, it's that Kyle Pitts is not it in fantasy. Pitts entered the league as a perceived generational talent at the position, thanks to his huge frame at and a 4.5 speed. But in just 8 games in his final season of Florida, he had 770 yards and 12 touchdowns. Florida fans will scream for Kyle Pitts. I don't know if it necessarily is translated over to the NFL. You throw in a compelling 1,000-yard season as a rookie, and the sky seemed like the limit for the 4th overall pick, which was very high for a tight end in the 2021 draft. Now, unfortunately, a torn MCL ended Pitt's sophomore campaign after just 10 games. And things simply failed to get overly better in 2023 or 2024, where he's finished tight end 17 and tight end 21. Now, sometimes we can write an enticing bounce back story about an underperforming fantasy asset with, mad counting numbers thanks to great metrics. But this doesn't seem to be the case here, guys. There's still a good player here somewhere. Pitts' 2-touchdown performance against the Buccaneers on tight end day looked like the potential start to a breakout. This is still a special athlete who should be a problem for linebackers and safeties to cover one-on-one. But still, as George H.W. Bush once said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again. Okay. Bottom line is maybe last year's August hamstring limited Pitts more than we realized. And then again, a current foot issue and trade murmurs didn't exactly paint a rosy picture ahead of 2025. Ultimately, all of the rankers that I've seen have Pitts between tight end 17 and tight end 20. Maybe the Falcons engage in enough shootouts for, maybe the allegedly ultra-talented pass catcher to finally boom at his cheapest cost, right? But I still struggle to get excited due to the potential for him to again work as the number 4 pass game option in his own offense, guys. Okay, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, they are by far better options in that offense than Kyle Pitts. And then you also have Bijan Robinson, who again has caught 119 passes out of the backfield in the last 2 seasons. Okay, now what defense has boasted the worst pass rushers in recent years? As you can probably guess by this question's placement inside the Falcons team preview, things haven't really been great here. 2020, the pressure rate, they were ranked number 19th. We're going to go from 2021 to 2024, which goes 32nd, 31st, 25th, and 23. And then last year, they ranked 30th. Guys, the pass rush has not been good. Has not been good at all for the Atlanta Falcons. Overall, nobody has a lower average rank than the Falcons during this span, and it's not particularly close. The best team? It might hurt to say, but the Cowboys. Thanks in large part to the decision to draft Micah Parsons since 2021 with the 10th overall pick. But surely the Falcons didn't draft, a relatively disappointing tight end or something instead of arguably the best pass rusher in the league that year. How do things look different if they go Micah Parsons instead of Kyle Pitts? But kudos to the front office for signing Leonard Floyd and using a pair of the first rounders in an attempt to spruce up the pass rush. But in my opinion, there's still quite a ways to go before, even they approach mediocrity. Okay. Prediction for the Falcons in 2025. Vegas seems pessimistic that the Falcons are meaningfully improved. Their 7.5 win total puts them next to the likes of the Cowboys, the Jags, the Colts ahead of 2025. I actually don't mind the over on this number, considering the potential for the offense to once again work as an above-average unit, alongside a defense that should be improved, given their improvement. It's an edge rusher and the newfound presence of longtime defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich. Excuse me. As for my bold fantasy take for the Atlanta Falcons, Darnell Mooney, again, works as the clear-cut number 2 pass game option and winds up clearing 1,000 yards on his way to a top 30 finish in points per game. Next team we're going to talk about here is the Carolina Panthers. Again, appreciate everybody sticking around. These weeks have been a little lengthy, but we try to get through all these divisions so that way we can have all the information given to us before the start of the season. As for the Panthers, year one of the Dave Canales experience in Carolina didn't start off too hot. Back-to-back season opening beatdowns led to Andy Dalton taking over for Bryce Young, if we remember that. who seemingly only got another chance with the starting job after Dalton was involved in a mid-season automobile accident. Okay? Well, then something funny happened, right? Young began to play the best football of his career. Flashing big-time throws, doing everything in his power to put his team in a position to beat the contenders like Chiefs, Bucks, and Eagles, which he did. He didn't beat all those teams, but he put his team in a position to win those ball games. Guys, the game against the Eagles was a game-closing interception. The Chiefs game was extremely close. Okay? The season-long numbers admittedly weren't great, but this really was an improved team during the second half of the year after he got back. I think, I had touched on it before. I really do think that Bryce Young, to an extent, got humbleized. I think that he got his job taken from him. He had to watch this older quarterback take what was supposed to be his and lead it. And when he got another chance, he made the most of his opportunity. Okay, now we fast forward to 2025. Young has now a legitimate number one wide receiver in the form of Territola McMillan, while the front office also threw some serious dollars at arguably the single worst defense in the league from a season ago. Okay, this brings us to our questions about the Carolina Panthers. How great was Bryce Young's second half transformation? Okay, well, from week 8 on, among 36 qualified quarterbacks, because that means that 36 qualified quarterbacks had started in a game week 8 after. That's what that means, guys. He was 6th in PFF pass grade. He was 1st in big-time throw rate, which was 7%. He likes that deep ball, guys. He also was quarterback 13 in fantasy points per game at 18.9. Okay, those initial 2 data points allow Bryce truthers to paint a truly promising picture in a comparison group, for the 23 NFL number 1 overall pick. Of course, the more traditional efficiency stats demonstrate the reality that it still wasn't all roses for Young down the stretch, right? And we can't completely ignore his first 18 rather atrocious career starts. I'm also a little skeptical. Young's late season fantasy goodness is overly repeatable, considering how much of his production came on the ground. Okay, consider Young scored the second most fantasy points from strictly rushing production in weeks 13 through 18, thanks to a large part to 5 rushing touchdowns, both marks more than any quarterback not named Josh Allen. Okay, the optimistic case for Young would revolve around more improvements during his second year in the Canales system, along with the potential for some of the teams, young pass game options to grow during their second season. Okay, the newfound presence of the first-rounder Ted McMillan should also help matters when it comes to the offense's ability to make life just a little bit easier for their hopeful franchise quarterback. Okay, now, we talked about that open score, right, earlier. We talked about that open score, and it basically breaks down to quantify separation. Okay, these are the worst teams when it comes to wide receivers and tight ends with the separation in 2024. Okay, the Cowboys at 28, Bills at 29, Patriots at 30, Raiders at 31, and the Carolina Panthers were worse in the league at separation from their wide receivers and tight ends. That doesn't make it easy on Bryce Young, guys. Okay, so what is our fantasy outlook for 2025 when it comes to Bryce Young? I'm higher on Young than any other fantasy ranker that I've seen, okay? And he, excuse me, he comes in as my quarterback 22. We're talking about the quarterback 29 in fantasy points per game among 33 quarterbacks with at least 16 starts over the last 2 seasons. Okay. Look for the rising third-year talent to enjoy his best NFL season yet, in my opinion. But that still might not be good enough to produce more than a low-end quarterback 2 value in fantasy land. Okay, let's move on to the running backs. Does Chuba Hubbard have running back 1 upside? Can he be a starter for your squad? Hubbard managed to rack up 1,135 total yards and 5 touchdowns in 2023 on his way to yanking that starting job away from, well, the high-priced free agent Miles Sanders. Okay, the former 4th-round pick didn't exactly enter 2024 as a mystery man, but expectations also weren't sky high after the Panthers took the first running back in the draft in Jonathan Brooks. Unfortunately, Brooks' extended recovery timeline and ensuing re-torn ACL prevented him from making any noise as a rookie. This gave Hubbard the opportunity to run away with the starting job, and the 4th-year back row didn't disappoint. Overall, Hubbard's average of 80 rush yards per game ranks 7th among all running backs. Okay, and his 1.16 plus rush yards over expected trailed only Derrick Henry, Barkley, and Jordan Mason last year. Pretty good company. And according to the Panthers, made their starting running back of the present and a future rich man, when he got his extension. That said, there is some newfound competition in the form of ex-Cowboys running back Rico Dowdle. Okay. They did sign him only to a 1-year, $2 million contract worth up to $6 million in base case scenario with incentives. Now, Dowdle deserves credit for largely making the most out of his opportunities last season when he led the entire NFL in percentage of carries to gain at least 3 yards after contact. Guys, that percentage was 51% of the time. That is crazy. Panthers GM Dan Morgan called Hubbard and Rico kind of a 1-2 punch when he was asked about it. While Canales spoke of the advantages of having 2 guys with the same type of style, and he actually called both backs war daddies. I don't know what that means. I'm a military veteran, and I don't even know what that means. So if someone could lighten me on what a war daddy is, we can maybe tackle this at a different time. But a more split backfield certainly won't be ideal for Hubbard, who posted the position's 4th best score last season behind only Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, and Saquon Barkley when it came to opportunities given. Okay, so what is the outlook for Chuba Hubbard in 2025? The Panthers didn't exactly hand Rico Dowdle the sort of money to guarantee a big-time role, in my opinion. But then again, Hubbard's ascension over Miles Sanders in the first place adds precedence to the idea that Canales and company might care less than most about that sort of thing. Okay, ultimately, Hubbard comes in as my running back 16, who's I've honestly seen as one of the more higher-ranked ones, just behind more sure things like Kamara and James Cook, but ahead of guys, breaking in new offenses like Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. Okay, Dowdle is more of a handcuff with hopeful flex upside in a running back 4 or 5 tier with guys like Roshan Johnson, Jordan Mason, and Isaac Guerendo. Okay, he's a late round dart for me. How early is too early to draft Tet McMillan? Okay. I read the Fantasy Life projections because I did not do projections for targets. So we had to get our information from elsewhere. But this is how they have the wide receiver room being divided in the following manner. Okay, Tet has 123 targets, Xavier Legette 80, Adam Thielen 69, and Jalen Coker 45. Expectations are immediately sky high for, I think T-Mac, but that's what happens when you come off the board as the 8th overall pick. There's a lot to love about the Panthers' gargantuan 22-year-old. Simply earning top 10 draft capital hasn't always led to great year one fantasy results, though. Okay. We look at names like AJ Green, Julio Jones, Justin Blackmon, Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans had 1,000 yards, though. Mike Williams missed time. Ja'Marr Chase had the best rookie season, out of my opinion. Can Travis Hunter play full-time wide receiver? Can, Roman Dunze last year? Yikes. Malik Neighbors was the second best season out of rookie campaign. Marvin Harrison was a snuff. Garrett Wilson was simply amazing. Devontae Smith really wasn't even good, guys. So, we look at these numbers and, it's always not a guarantee. But yet, McMillan might be the sort of prospect worth betting on having an outlier campaign. Okay. I think that, he is going to be the guy for Byrce Young, in my opinion, but there's also Leggett, whose NFL debut was more so defined by his interview process and the sheesh of the year drop of the year that he won. The counting numbers largely speak for themselves. Leggett last year under 50 receptions, under 500 yards, and just 4 touchdowns. But the underlying efficiency metrics were really rough, even relative to the past rookies. Okay. So what is the fantasy outlook for the wide receiver room in Carolina? I had McMillan ranked wide receiver 20 before putting together the my actual list. And screw it, I'm staying strong. Most players in that range have one red flag or another. T-Mac's potential to have one of the league's largest target shares on a team that figures to again see plenty of comeback action makes him someone I'm willing to bet on ahead of 2025. Now, that said, I struggle to get behind pretty much anyone else in that passing game. Expecting too many fireworks here feels like wishful thinking. There's potential for more of a rotation than usual between Thielen, Leggett, Coker, considering the age of the former veteran and Thielen. I'd be most willing to throw a late round dart at Thielen out of the three, but rolling with higher best case scenario upside handcuff running backs in that range of the draft is usually preferred. Okay, so the tight end, does Jatavion Sanders does Jatavion Sanders deserve late round consideration? He certainly seems to be in line to have a chance to lead this offense. Tommy Tremble back surgery isn't expected to return to action until sometime in the preseason. How does that look? The Panthers' 2024 fourth-round pick was considered by many to be the tight end 2 in that class, and he proved 2 things as a rookie. Okay. Well, there's some legit pass game ability here, as Sanders has the sort of frame, 6'4", 245 as a big guy at tight end, to make the plays in contested catch situations. And enough straight line speed because he ran a 4.6 40 to be a problem with the football in his hands, right? The Panthers are willing to pay him to play him as a full-time player. He cleared 80% of the offensive snaps on 2 occasions and had 4 more games north of 70. Okay, so he's on the field, guys. That said, Tremble isn't exactly guaranteed to miss any actual regular season action. And he limited Sanders to the 56% route rate during the final 5 weeks of last year. Throwing the decision to draft all around Notre Dame, that might be a little biased, but Mitchell Evans at round 5. And it feels like a leap of faith to overly expect Sanders to have meaningful target volume inside of an offense that finished 26th in total pass game opportunities in the position in 2024. Okay. The bottom line here, guys, is feel free to add Sanders as a late round stack addition to teams with maybe Teratoa or, Bryce Young. But otherwise, I prefer throwing darts at like guys we've already talked about, Mike Gesicki and K. Dotton, at just a slightly more expensive cost. But again, with their far more superior offensive environments. Okay. So what is our outlook for the Panthers in 2020? Vegas isn't exactly expecting the world's biggest comeback in Carolina this season, as their 6.5 win total is right there with the Raiders as the bottom 7 mark in the league. But you know what? Give me the over. Give me the over here on the Marshall Experience. There was enough money thrown at the problems during free agency to believe that the defense can be improved and that there are signs of good things going on with Bryce Young and company as well. Now, I'm not going to jump the gun and say I wouldn't say an NFC championship is on the horizon or a division championship at that. But approaching 8 wins feels reasonable and would still be a nice improvement for Bryce Young and company. Now, my bold fantasy prediction for the Carolina Panthers is that T-Mac joins Malik Neighbors, Jahmyr Chase, and Julio Jones as the only top 10 picks to return wide receiver 1 production as rookies since 2010. Okay. Our last team that we're going to talk about tonight, guys, is the New Orleans Saints. Okay. The Saints look like an absolute buzzsaw during the first 2 weeks of the season. In last season. They destroyed the Panthers 47-10. Destroyed the Cowboys 44-19. Okay, Derek Carr was unironically receiving dark horse MVP hype. Alvin Kamara was balling out like it was 2020 again. Clint Kubiak was being propped up as the next OC, right? The next wonder kid. Life was good for all Saints fans in early September. And then suddenly it wasn't. Injuries all over the offense led to 7 consecutive losses. The firing of head coach Dennis Allen, while brief midseason surge, wasn't enough to prevent the Saints from finishing with their fewest wins, number 5 at 5 since the 2005 season. Okay. Fast forward to 2025. Now the new head coach, Kellen Moore, is leading a roster that sure seems to be feeling the pain from years of kicking the salary cap can down the road. Okay, some longtime starts like Kamara and Cameron Jordan remain. Just realize that most logical people fully expect the Saints to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. Okay, what does an upside scenario for Tyler Sow look like? Okay, Tyler Sow was drafted out of Louisville this last year by the Saints. The Saints selected now the elderly rookie at 26 already with the 40th overall pick in the 2025 overall draft. We thought this pick was going to be Shadur Sanders. While many have balked at the idea that Sow was a legitimate NFL starter, or has legit NFL starter ceiling, after he basically only turned in 1 good year during 7 seasons at Oregon, Texas Tech, and Louisville. Okay, he is 6'5", 225. He does seem to have sort of tools to potentially work out in the right situation. But again, is this the right situation? Of course, the right situation certainly isn't guaranteed to be in New Orleans. Head coach Kellen Moore has led top 7 scoring offenses in 4 of his 6 seasons as the OC, although his work with the 2023 Chargers was underwhelming to say the least when he had Justin Herbert. Last year's Eagles offense wasn't exactly, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like he had weapons everywhere. I mean, it's hard to fail, right? Consider last year's Eagle team ranked 6th in supporting cast ratings, and the Saints were 24th. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are the solid 1-2 punch when healthy. But PFF's reigning 22nd ranked offensive line better hope that 9th overall pick, Kelvin Banks, is ready to contribute immediately. Or I think Tyler Sow is going to be having more of a bad habits under pressure type of season. Okay, this is all working under the assumption that Sow does indeed win the job. Derek Carr's retirement leaves Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener also technically in the competition. Although there wasn't much from Rattler's rookie season to suggest that we're looking at a legit game-changing talent here. Okay, bottom line is that the Sow's best-case scenario involves 1, the injury gods leaving this offense alone. 2, Moore reestablishing himself as one of the league's premier play callers. Or 3, his sneaky athleticism, we'll call it sneaky, leading to a far more rushing production than what we saw in college. Okay, ultimately, I'm doubtful there's a ceiling worth chasing here, guys. So does profile as a potential value in fantasy land because he doesn't have much room to go up other than his current ADP at quarterback 30. Okay, Superflex drafters in need of a third quarterback late in the draft should feel free to throw a dart. But expecting fireworks from a non-blue chip rookie in a position that hasn't historically produced many great year one fantasy performers feels like wishful thinking. Okay, why is Alvin Kamara so cheap in fantasy land? Let's talk about it. We have never seen Kamara do anything other than work as an elite fantasy running back. Let's be honest about it. After all, he posted top 8 finishes in points per game during each of his first 4 seasons of his career alongside Drew Brees. It has gone for running back 5, 13, running back 3, and most recently, running back 5 finishes ever since. Okay, last season's performance was particularly awesome due to the generally porous environment in which Kamara was forced to operate in. Of course, the heavy workload afforded certainly helped matters. Nobody had a better utilization score. He's their best weapon, guys. This produced one of the position's most fantasy-friendly floors, as only Jahmyr Gibbs finished as a top 24 running back in a higher percentage of games than Kamara. Okay? Look, obviously the Saints aren't the sort of offense we should be dying to get exposure to. Vegas implied lines have them outscoring only the Browns this season. Now, there's also at least some age cliff concern for the soon-to-be 30-year-old back, right? We talk about that cutoff being 28 years old. But he didn't exactly put his best foot forward in terms of rushing efficiency last season. Here's the thing. Kamara's receiving prowess is largely unmatched at the position. He's joined Devin Achane, Breece Hall, and Rachaad White as the only 4 backs to earn over half of their PPR production through the air last season. He's the check down master, as he should be this season with either a rookie quarterback, Jake Haener, or Spencer Rattler. Okay? This is the running back's most points per game from receiving last season. He finished second at 9.6, only behind Devon Achane. Now, that while Saquon Barkley only had 43 targets under Moore's direction last season, Austin Eckler had 74 in 14 games in 23, which was tied for 5th. When he was with Dallas, Cowboy running backs as a whole ranked 20th in targets from 2019 to 2022. Okay, we currently do have him earning a position high 80 targets next season. Now, behind that longtime featured back in the Saints world, we have Keandre Miller, who has flashed some talent, but he is yet to prove that he can stay healthy for a full season. Still, the number 2 running back job seems to be his for the tanking, with longtime hater Dennis Allen and Jamal Williams now out of the picture. Rookie Devin Neal displayed some nice receiving upside during his 4 seasons at Kansas. Although the history of 6th-round picks making too much noise as rookie, isn't great. They have CEH Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still hanging around the league somehow. And Velus Jones is listed as the running back on the depth chart, which is objectively hilarious. So, what is the outlook for Calvin Kamara in 2025? The offensive environment and the age factors make Kamara a no-go as a 3rd-round pick, in my opinion. But as a 5th or 6th rounder, I'm buying. We're talking about someone with likely overall running back level utilization and really no history of failing to return top 12 results, guys. Kamara is currently being priced around borderline wide receiver 3 types, like Jordan Addison and Jawan Jennings, and goes after the top tier quarterbacks, and tight ends are already off the board. This is a fantastic 0 running back pick for those into that kind of thing. Okay. I haven't found myself throwing many darts at these backup running backs. It's unclear if any of them would get a chance to handle a featured workload should Kamara miss any time. Reminder, Kamara has played in at least 13 games during every season of his career. Now, wide receiver room. Could both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed be values at their ADP? Olave turned in back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons to start his career, but was limited to just 8 games in 2024 due to 2 concussions. Now, that's 5 documented concussions for the former 11th overall pick since 2022. Yet Olave still showed off the sort of, route running ability that he has that has been a staple of his game dating back to his time at Ohio State. Really, the man just knows how to get open, guys. Again, we go back to that open rating, that separation. He was 7th as a rookie, 14th the year after, and 12th last season. The only wide receivers with better 3-year marks in separation is Malik Neighbors, Dante Johnson, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, and Zay Flowers. It's awfully good company, guys. And the pre-route numbers back up the idea that Olave deserves to be considered one of the position's top young talents. Now, as for Shaheed, well, the man's good at football. Shaheed managed to post 4 top 18 fantasy finishes in just 6 games last season. However, that mark tied Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Garrett Wilson, and was more than guys like Jalen Waddle, George Pickens, and DK Metcalf. It's not too shabby, guys. The Saints' field stretching has averaged, he's averaged 15 yards per reception while catching at least 20 passes in each of the last 3 seasons. Something only Pickens has also managed to achieve across the NFL. Nobody has more touchdown passes on passes thrown 30 yards downfield or more than Shaheed over the past 2 seasons. Okay, also the former first-team All-Pro returner is electric in the return game. He was sneaky solid on the ground as well. 7.2 career yards per carry on just 17 attempts. Shaheed, simply put, he's a dog. Here's to hoping up whoever winds up under center for the Saints in 2025 is capable of getting this playmaker the football and being able to throw a deep ball. So what is the outlook for the Saints wide receivers in 2025? There are obviously major question marks under center. for the parties involved in this passing game. But we're talking about two of the very few wide receivers priced outside the position's top 36 options with triple target projections. Okay? These are wide receivers projected for 100+ targets while being outside the top 36. Okay? Olave, Judy, Myers, Khalil Shakir, Michael Pittman, Raheem Shaheed, Cedric Tillman, and Wan'Dale Robinson making the cut. Okay, now while all parties involved have the potential for reduced efficiency due to their respective situations under center, the low involved prices make them reasonable picks at cost. I get the concern surrounding Olave's concussion history. Although it's worth remembering, he played in 31 of his potential 34 games during the 2020, his first two seasons. It'd be shocking to me if any of Brandon Cooks, Bub Beans, or Cedric Wilson emerge as fantasy viable assets this season, especially with the Saints, continuing to flirt with the free agent options like Gabe Davis. They bring in Gabe Davis. I think those guys are just depth pieces, barring injury. Now, does Juwan Johnson deserve more respect as a late-round dart throw? Johnson is more of a wide receiver than tight end in many ways. The longtime Saint is a bit undersized for tight end, in my opinion, 6'4", 230. He does have a little bit more juice behind him, running a 4.58 second 40-yard dash back in the day, but that's most players. That's faster than most players at the position. However, unlike someone like Mike Gesicki, Johnson has made more of a habit of actually functioning as an inline option, which was 55% of the snaps. So he's basically blocking. Wherever he's lined up, if he's running a route, Johnson has done a great job creating separation and getting open. Again, guys, we go back to that open score. Top tight ends in ESPN's open score metric from the last 3 seasons. Top 5 tight ends are Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, and Juwan Johnson. Johnson actually comes in tied for 6th with Sam Laporta as the ESPN's highest rated tight end overall during this span. Now, every efficiency measure paints the former undrafted free agent a world beater, right? Just realize this is a player capable of making some very athletic plays at the position. Okay, so what is our outlook for him? Bottom line, I think that his 3-year extension made him the league's 12th highest paid option at the position. That's pretty steep investment for somebody regularly available at the very end of drafts. I love tacking on Johnson as my tight end 3 when needed. Thanks to the potential for him to supply similar numbers, as far more expensive options like Hunter Henry and Pat Freiermuth. But that's a bad offense, guys. It's a bad offense, and I'm trying to avoid it. Okay, so last but not least, what is our prediction for the Saints in 2025? Okay, the Saints join the Giants, Titans, Jets, and Browns as the only 5 teams with a 5.5 win total, and it's no surprise why. The massive hole under center is complemented by a roster that PFF just ranked as the 3rd worst group in the league. Okay, give me the under here for a team currently favored to win, in my opinion, only 1 game next year. Do they win 1 game? I think they win about 3. But they are only favored to win 1 game next year, guys. That's tough. My bold fantasy prediction is that Chris Olave stays healthy enough to play 15 games and returns to a top 24 production in fantasy land. Okay, you heard it first here at Marshall Experience. And next week, guys, Tuesday, 8 o'clock Central, we are going to be talking about the AFC South. Texans, Colts, Jags, and the Titans. Make sure you guys tune back in. Guys, we are 3 episodes away from being done and completely covering every NFL team as a fantasy whole. If you have not catched prior episodes, head to YouTube, check those out, hit that subscribe button. We are really needing our subscribers on YouTube. It would be deeply appreciated. Again, thank you to the Sports Lounge Media for everything that they do, and the Mogul brand and the Diamond Collection. Guys, it's been a fun one tonight. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. I appreciate everybody sticking around. Again, these weeks have been lengthy, but we're going to get through them because we want to give you the best content available and in your fantasy journey. So again, guys, appreciate everybody tuning in. Marshall Experience out. You guys have a good night. Thank you.